right, let's get started. I want to thank everyone for attending our weekly Lunch and Learn. I'm Ed DeVeaux. I'm president of the New Jersey Cannabusiness Association, the state's first and largest trade association built and developed for helping our state create a responsible, sustainable, diverse, and profitable cannabis industry. We are very proud to host our Lunch and Learns, and we thank some of our sponsors. We thank the law firm of Inglesino, Webster, Wyciskala, and Taylor. We thank Puffin, cannabis entrepreneurs and investors. I want to thank ABS, who does our production work, and of course, thank all of you for joining. Speaking of members, this afternoon, as you all are aware, the Lunch and Learn series is for some of our more prominent members to actually highlight what they do, not only for the cannabis industry, but maybe for New Jersey industry altogether. So this afternoon, we are very fortunate to have with us the firm of CohnReznick. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to my friend, George Gallinger, to introduce his team, and they can certainly get started with their presentation.
Thanks so much, Ed, and we're just so happy to be here. My name is George Gallinger. I'm the partner and national director, risk advisory for CohnReznick. CohnReznick is a leading advisory, assurance, and tax firm here in New Jersey. However, we're New York based and we have offices nationwide and internationally. CohnReznick jumped into the cannabis world very early on, and since then we've developed a very strong portfolio of both plant touching and non-plant touching cannabis clients. We're proud to be a corporate member of the New Jersey Cannabis Association, and quite frankly, we're here to serve this association, do everything we can to help the association in their mission to build a strong, robust, sustainable, fair cannabis industry for the state. We have a great presentation today. Hopefully we can have a lot of dialogue or a lot of chat going back and forth. Without too much more talking from me, I really do want Stacie and Chris to take this over. I know we have limited time, but again, we are just so proud and so happy to be here. We look forward to presenting again sometime in the future on other topics. And if you have any ideas, feel free to send a note or two, and we'll be glad to see what we can do as far as giving information on that.
Thanks, George.
Thank you.
I'm Stacie Jefferies. I'm excited to be here with you today. Thank you for inviting us. I work at CohnReznick for the last several years. I come from 18 years being in the retail industry. So costing is in my blood. I love that. I thrive on that. But also now at CohnReznick, I'm helping a lot of cannabis industry clients with not only their operational sides, but also the dispensary side. So that's kind of my background. And with me is Chris.
So Chris D'Arduini, I'm a senior manager here at CohnReznick. I'm also one of the industry leads in cannabis. Have a deep manufacturing background. You know, more years in the space than Stacie, and ultimately that I'd like to admit. But you know, as it relates, you know, to cannabis, I'm here in New Jersey, big advocate. You know, supporting you know, startups through some of the larger MSOs. You know, here in North America. You know, with operational efficiencies, process re-engineering, you know, costing, technology strategy, as it relates to, you know, the QuickBooks of the world, as well as some of our bigger, larger technologies like Infor, Microsoft, SAP. So looking forward to today's conversation. One thing I want to touch back on real quick before we jump into costing, Stace, maybe we can just go back over our, you know, the client list and, you know, talk a little bit about, you know, the 140, 160 or so clients that we have. When George talks about, you know, what we're doing in the industry, it's, you know, tax, audit, it's all of the advisory services that, you know, one may be thinking of, whether it's risk, operational efficiency, technology selection, valuation services. So a large plethora of services. You know, think of us as one of the, you know, tier one full advisory and tax and audit shops in the cannabis here in North America. A lot of other companies you may know of in the tax and audit space are not playing here. So to George's point, it shows our commitment to the industry as we were an early adopter, and you could see as it relates to our client list, we really are dedicated to this industry, and we're looking forward to today's discussion and bringing New Jersey into the spotlight here, because I think it's a huge play on the retail side now that we're officially legal, and obviously it's a big medical association already. So with that being said, Stacie, I'll turn it over to you to kick this thing started.
Great. So we have a short agenda. We're here to chit chat today. Kind of talk about costing, choosing the right costing strategies, the challenges that we face in achieving those costs, understanding those costs, and the potential impact of having incorrect costs. And then, what are the benefits of getting it right? And we'll open it up to some Q&A at the end. So let's dive in. What is costing and why does it matter, right? So it's basically, at its lowest form, it's important to know what items that you're selling actually cost you to produce, right? So getting that base is going to help you understand, right? It's the raw costs of growing those plants, the costs of labor, the costs of keeping the lights on during that whole growth cycle before it even gets out to be in the marketplace. So knowing that structure and understanding that different plants have different costs, have different yields, different plants deserve different prices, right? So it's understanding what this costs you, what the value of that is, what else is in the marketplace, getting that right mix of products and getting the right price attached to each item is what's going to keep your overall business healthy and keep you thriving and keep you here next year and keep you, moving down that path to get to the thought leadership and being a leader in the industry. Something that's on here that comes up a lot when I talk about is getting the right mix of products, and that's sort of a retail term to say, like, what's your portfolio of what you're offering? And if we use an example, I'm going to go to retail again here, but if you go into a Best Buy, you may or may not know, but they're not making any money on those televisions they're selling you, right? They might even lose a little bit of money, but they want to be the leader. So when you say, I want a new television, I'm going to go to Best Buy to get it because they have the selection I want and they have a great price. But they're going to hope that once you come in there and you buy that thing, they might lose a little money on that TV that you picked up and put in your cart, but they're going to hope that you buy that HDMI cable. Maybe you pick up that video game for your kid on the way out the door. Maybe you pick up a water or a candy bar at the checkout counter. They're going to make money on those pieces, and they're going to know that they have a happy customer, and you're going to come back next time when you need another item that might be more profitable. So it's getting that portfolio right, that mix right, that's going to keep your customer coming back. That's going to establish you as that brand. That's going to earn you that place in your customer's heart. We're talking about different cost methods. Chris, I know you have a lot of thoughts on the proper cost method. Maybe you could take this last point.
Yeah, of course. And I think, Stacie, just to keep it light, I think we should just talk a little bit about the product mix and ultimately what that means, in general terms from a dispensary perspective. A challenge we see, and I know Stacie's talking about building a brand and building that customer loyalty, is, do we have too many products that may force us to lose money, right? There's a lot of our cannabis clients that, as they start up, they need to have 40 strands and 3 different brands of those 40 strands, right? Is that the right product mix, or is it a couple of those high selling brands that may be lower margins, what our customers are really dying for, to then allow them to come in and buy accessories, buy our brand apparel, buy pipes and different things that we can sell, I'll call it almost as a kit, a full cycle of products that we can get them on the hook for. But just because, Chris D'Arduini walks in, to the dispensary and says, I want Skywalker, and I might be the only person coming in there for a 6-month period, it doesn't mean I need to stock my shelves with it, right? So it's, when we talk about product mix, it's having the right mix of products and ensuring that those mix are aligned with the brands that ultimately will force us to drive profits up. So we don't want to Stacie's point, have too many televisions. We want to have the right television that people want at a cost that is not going to cripple our business. Because in the end, we're pricing, we're producing, we're putting things on our shelves to ultimately drive profits. So, you know, I just want to make sure that we have that happy median of, as we build the brand, not exploding the number of SKUs to ultimately build that brand. So I think it's an important piece, you know, to where you were going, Stace.
Absolutely. Thank you, Chris.
Yeah, of course. Talking about, you know, cost methods, right? You know, for the accountants here and, you know, for the people just starting out, there's different methods, right? You know, there's your standard cost, you know, there's your average, there's LIFO, you know, last in, first out, there's FIFO, first in, first out, all of these different things to be thinking about, you know, from a general costing perspective. And what does that ultimately mean for you guys? It means, oh my gosh, how am I going to do this, right? And where am I going to do it? And how do I start? So just because, you know, someone says you should be thinking about standard cost, ask the question of what that means. How do I set my standards? What goes into my standard sets of cost? How do I build cost models that allow me to be successful and to capture the cost that I need to capture in order to generate, you know, those profit margins, right? Not everything is going to be as simple as, you know, labor, material, you know, that overhead, you know, Stacie mentioned it before, you know, the lighting, the pesticides, you know, the different nutrients that I'm putting into a grow, where do those ultimately fit? And how do they fit from a tax perspective? You know, when we talk about 280E, and I'm not going to sit here and say I'm an expert there, but, you know, that's where, you know, finding the right mix of people as you build these models is really important. And I would challenge you guys, especially, you know, as we're either scaling our business or just starting out, think about what profit margins do I want to make? And how do I get to a point that I can analyze those profits? And it's capturing the right cost. It's having an ability to do things maybe outside of a spreadsheet, right? You know, think about systems that may need to be in place to give you that visibility from an overall cost perspective. So it's a lot of different variables when you think about what the right cost model is, you know, to ultimately follow, because everyone could go into Google and figure out what standard cost is versus average cost versus LIFO versus FIFO. But what does it mean for your business? And do you have the ability to capture all of these costs when building out a cost model? So the right mix, the right way to capture costs, the profit margins in which you want to make profit, and what products are going to give you that profitability, you know, are some of the things that our clients really don't look at when starting out. And they're behind the 8 ball and they're producing products and they don't know if they're profitable. And in the end, if you don't know if you're profitable, there's a good chance that you won't be doing this in a year, right? There's only so much capital and cash that's available out there for us, and that we can ultimately support, you know, these revenue dollars. Revenue is great if your short-term strategy is to be bought, but in 2 years, if you're looking to scale your business and you don't have any capital, you can't scale, right? And then you're maybe selling for pennies on the dollar in terms of what the brand value that you created. So just, you know, think about how you want to cost and ultimately what that means in terms of the types of costs you can capture.
Great point, Chris. And that's a good segue into, you know, what are the challenges that we're facing when we're coming up with these, with assigning the cost and when understanding what is the retail price that's going to balance that out. Once we know what the cost is, how much do we need to sell it for to cover all of the other costs of being in business, right? So it takes 3 months to produce the plant from seed to sale. What could happen during that time? Nothing, right, Chris? Everything's a perfect, like you plant it and you know exactly what your yield's going to be when you come out on the other side, right?
It's simple, right? It's clone, veg, bloom, harvest. I mean, it's as simple as that. It's not, there's not 150 days that go in between all of those activities.
Right. And even, I mean, even your mix of planting and the mix of products sold can vary from what you think. You know, when you put the intention in today, it might be different 3 months from now in terms of what the customer wants, in terms of what else is in the marketplace. You know, what the guy down the street have, and how much is he pricing it for? And that could really impact your plans about what you thought your price was going to be, could be impacted by what else is in the market. If there's a flood of a similar product, it could push your price down. If there's a lack of interest, it could push your price down from where you had laid out those great plans initially. So it's, again, it's kind of having that mix of products that you're going to sell day in, day out, that's going to cover those unexpected, those surprises that come either from the quantity of the yield that you got, might not be as much as you thought it was going to be, or maybe a little bit more of something else, can really impact your decision. And that's all, I mean, it's all reliant on data. Chris, you were touched on this just a moment ago, is having something that's going to tell you, okay, well, here we are, we have our crop, we have our output, this is what we sold it for. How do we know if we did it right? And we're kind of looking backwards at what we did 3 months ago with the costs of today, and having the data to give you the ability to analyze that and understand, did that work? Okay, maybe I was a little light, maybe we're a little tight happening now. Like, let's make those adjustments and course correct so that the next round that we're going through is going to be better for us. Getting that visibility to data is really key.
And Stace, to that point, when we think of data, right, it's real-time data. You know, it's not backwards looking, in terms of, something you may have captured on a spreadsheet or, booked in a catalog in terms of the number of hours someone had, put in. So it's thinking about, how do I capture this data, right? And having an ability to make some, semi-real-time decisions. Because if, you go through a whole, grow process, and the grower, your farmer thinks that everything, ultimately went well. I started on day 1, I finished on day 120. That's what I expected to do. But if I don't know how many man hours I put in there, how much material, went in there, how many times I potentially had an outbreak, additional nutrients I had to put in the plants, and I'm not tracking that and what they call consuming on a production order, how am I going to know any of those costs? Right? I'm just guessing, or I'm just allocating after the fact based on the spend I've already made. So, having the right processes in place and then the systems to capture that data, is truly key, because to your point, when we're doing activities, data comes out of those activities. What do we ultimately do with it? And more often than not, we're not doing anything. And I would say that's a big challenge in the industry.
That is definitely a hurdle, right? So getting your hands on that data and then evaluating it and making that change is really, that's the good to great.
Yeah.
How we can take what we've learned, not repeat, get out of the cycle of repeating those mistakes, identify what's working, what's not working,
right,
and move forward.
Yeah, and in larger scale, manufacturing and other industries, pennies matter. The ways to shave dollars and cents when you extrapolate it out over time, those are real dollars. That's real money you make back. It may seem insignificant at the time, but as you scale, as you grow, every penny counts. Coca-Cola didn't get where they got to by, not trying to enhance their recipe, do better branding on their cans, and try to drive down those costs. It's certainly important factors that we should be, taking from standard industry and learning.
Absolutely. Great point. That's a great point, Chris. So let's talk about the benefits. Once we've done this work and we have an accurate cost, how is that going to help us? It's going to, four big areas here. We kind of bucketed. Having data can help us inform our business decisions, right? So you can make a smart choice, know your cost before you're assigning it a price. Going to let you be in the driver's seat, right? Instead of having it drive you or having the market push your prices for you, you know what's happening, you know what this costs you, you know what the right place to start is, and you know what you can afford to sell it at. We're looking at the ability to, once you have that basic in place, then you can kind of focus on efficiencies. And that's going back to those pennies, Chris, right? If you can save those pennies a little bit at a time, that really adds up. That gives you the flexibility to make other decisions when something doesn't go your way. It gives you the ability to put something in your pocket to save up for expansion. It is costly. As you grow, you're going to need more pieces more in your toolkit, right? You might need more equipment. You might need to hire some additional staff as you're growing. You might need different software that's going to help you keep track of your growing business, and you need to have those extra dollars in your pocket to cover.
Yeah, and Stace, think about the fail safes, right? Where we're growing, in some of our cases, we're cultivating product, right? Not every cultivation run is going to produce the same yields, to your earlier point.
Yes.
So you may lose a whole crop, right? And that's just sunken cost, that we have to recoup somewhere. So little things like that, even when we go all the way back to talking about cost models, those extraneous instances, COVID happens, how do we account for some of these things, in the future, in terms of our costs, because it's not just all the production, but it's other factors that we can't control. There's environment, if we have outdoor grows, I mean, even for indoor grows, you can have an HVAC fail, and what does that do? Does that cripple a whole room? Does it cripple the whole production facility? So many different things, that you have to take into account, and ultimately push back into the cost. And it goes back to your point of data, using that data to help you make informed decisions, because our game is ever changing. It's not going to slow down. There's always different instances that we're dealing with when you think about producing product.
Absolutely. And having that sort of end-to-end view, and seeing what happened in that arch, and was there a pandemic in the middle? Was there a crop failure? Was there an infestation? Lots of things happen that we don't want to plan for. Having that end-to-end visibility is key, right? So that gives you the data. It allows you to build your roadmap, and again, course correct as things come in. We were all thrown a year ago. We were shut down. Lots of things happened. Demand stayed, but not our abilities to meet those demands were really impacted. And what happened next?
Chris or Stacie, this is fantastic information as always. Just a question. I know we have some clients that we're experiencing that are non-plant touching, and there's certainly some concerns there around profit and cost, especially because you're reliant upon if you're serving an industry, part of that supply chain to an industry is maybe not yet stable yet. Right, and so we're seeing, our client base concerns around how much inventory, if you're a third-party providing fertilizer, how much raw material do I need? What's the seasonality? What's the draw on that going to be, and the mix? So it goes beyond just the plant touching. We're seeing a lot, and I'm sure Stacie and Chris, they're seeing that as well. So it's I think what you guys are saying, this is definitely a balance that you need to be very vigilant and monitoring, especially if you're serving an industry like the cannabis industry in a new state that's just developing. So.
Yeah, and George, it's a fair point, and I think Stace was right about to hit on it when we talk about planning. The joke that I always, and it's not a joke because deep down, all of our cannabis clients are experiencing it. It's that chasing our tail as it relates to the supply chain, is that there's that demand that's there, but what are all of the other components we have to factor in when we think of, as you said, raw materials from a planning perspective? I run what they call, MRP, material requirements. Do I have those materials in stock? If they're not in stock, do I have, the vendor connections to get me that raw material that I need at the price that I want it? So when you think about all of those other components, here comes everything else when you talk about those third-party costs, bringing them in when you think of those raw materials, fertilizer, right? Think of right now, wood, right? The cost of lumber has gone up because of COVID 6x. What does that ultimately do to the housing market, and same thing with cannabis. There's a lot of potential supply chain challenges that you have to take into account. And when you're building out those cost models, where do I have those variances in what I previously purchased a raw material for versus what I purchased it for now, because the cost has gone up or down, in terms of positive or negative variances that you have to look at. So there's the whole cycle of the grow, and then on top of it, that being long, there's the whole supply chain challenge to ensure that you can meet that customer demand. And when we think of cultivating, it's a lot more difficult than if we were processing oils or making other extraction type products, where maybe I'm going out and buying finished I'll call it trim, right? I'm buying bulk trim so that I can go through the extraction. But there's a lot of factors, and you got to be thinking about everything when it comes down to cost. I think that's our driving point here, building out those cost models. If we don't have them, we don't know what to look for when analyzing our costs.
There's a lot of great information here, and just the first couple of slides makes me realize, and I was looking at some of the conversations in our chat feature. So by the way, everyone, please do use the chat feature to network, post some thoughts and ideas. And so what I want us to do is, if you would, because what I'm noticing is that there is, in fact, this disparity in terms of experience. While the industry does, in fact, have to rely on some large businesses, it does have to rely on some experienced operations and operators. We absolutely, for social justice, economic parity reasons, we do have to, and New Jersey has done this, lower the bar with respect to people who have historically been disadvantaged by this industry and others to get into the cannabis industry. So while we're looking at experienced, large operators and operations, we do have to take into account that there are smaller fledgling businesses that are about to enter into this industry. One of the things that we've done at the CannaBusiness Association is form a strategic alliance with social justice organizations. And we did that because we don't want our small operators to fail. We don't want people that have the idea of entering the industry to suffer. Look, one of the facts is, regardless of industry, regardless of business, most new businesses fail within the first 3 years. And so we're looking at the cannabis industry, and while we want everyone to succeed, you're pointing out things that just happen, and we have no control over, right? Stuff happens, right? To put it mildly. And so please share with us some of your experiences as you deal with the larger, more experienced operators and operations, and maybe give us some idea if you have had the opportunity to work with the smaller fledgling businesses, and how you might be able to help guide both. Again, because look, we created the micro license category in the state. Again, we wanted to lower the bar to entry. We wanted to mitigate risk. Losing 20,000 square feet of crop is a heck of a lot different than losing 2,000 square feet of crop. And so we did that with intention of mitigating risk, lowering bar to entry, but help us understand how you might help experienced large operations and the fleggling operator.
Yeah, it's a great question, Ed. And I'll say this, just from a overall cannabis practice perspective, we've run some minority and women-owned business seminars for startups. We've actually, created, some, I'll call it seminars from an outreach perspective as a firm, because, as I said, we believe in this industry, not just here in New Jersey, but nationwide and ultimately globally, to give the foundations of how should you be starting up a business. What should you be thinking about outside of just costing? right? Here, we're focused in on ensuring that small and large operators are thinking about the right things when it comes to cost, and really just the value of cost is what we're trying to present here. But from a firm perspective, as I said, we're running these seminars, giving people a end-to-end outlook of what they should be thinking about, when setting up a finance department, when setting up a strategy around, opening 1 dispensary versus 10, opening 10 with the hopes of being sold. So from an overall CohnReznick perspective, we're all in, and we're doing things not just at the industry level, but ultimately when we think of, as I said, this woman and minority-owned businesses, seminar in cannabis to help those businesses thrive and grow. So I don't know, George, if you have anything else, or Stacie, you want to add? But
what I would say, and this is great questions, because there's my whole life is dealing with is risk and risk advisory, and what we see in large organizations are we hope to see well-established control cultures. As you get to as you go slightly down in size, you see the effort around establishing controls and processes and protocols. You see it falling by the wayside more and more. And my word of advice to the startups is there's nothing more than nothing more important than setting that foundation and making sure you're operating in a controlled environment, because you get busy quick, and if you don't have processes and controls, and when things do happen, it's those processes and those controls and that formality that's going to keep your ship flying straight. And we see that all the time, and we talk about systems, and make sure you're focusing on access control. Who are you giving access to your systems, right? We're talking about cybersecurity. There's not a company out there that's not vulnerable to some type of breach and exposing privacy or protected information. And segregation of duties. I mean, these are basic controls that large organizations struggle with. So as you go smaller and you have a smaller shop, some of these controls, especially segregation of duties, become more and more difficult to achieve. So you really need to think through that. And that sounds actually maybe another session we can talk about basic controls or solid controls for a startup organization. So that's what we see from a risk advisory perspective.
Great. I think that was a good discussion. I don't know if there's any other questions that have popped up in the chat that we want to bring up as a team. I know we're close on time here. Ed, what are you thinking?
Oh no, this has been excellent. I did see a couple of questions, and I think the answer to one. There was a question regarding the term algorithms was used, and I'm thinking, is there a standard? And we started to talk about standards and metrics. And so I'm thinking, and this is where you correct me and help our guests understand. Look, it's a new industry, so we are just creating metrics now, right, as we speak. And clearly in New Jersey, there are only 12 license holders in the entire state, and so the ability to go to a data bank is it's non-existent, right? So your advice on that, or maybe not advice, but how do you address the notion that there is no data bank to go to, and as we are starting, as an individual starts, how does an individual move forward without having a basis, if that makes sense?
It makes complete sense, Ed, and I'll take the first stab, and team, feel free to join in. There are market databases, and talking about demographics, regions throughout North America that provide some of this information to help guide us. It's never going to be a clear one-to-one delineation, when you think about what the right product mix is and the types of products. But you will find information about, the large sellers that you can look across, various regions to make those determinations on what are the quote unquote best sellers. How do I build a multi-tier brand? Because I think that's important. I think I saw one question pop up, where you can have the same product and attach a different brand. Well, brands work in some areas and don't work in others, right? Because, there are, Nike versus Puma, there are people that are only going to go, with that high-end Nike brand, but there are people that, just want something that's stable, right? And so that market data is available to you. I will circle back exactly what that database is. It's losing, it's skipping my mind right now, but the information is not going to be New Jersey specific, but states like Massachusetts, where, they've gone legal recently, California, where, there's a lot of, general consensus in terms of the types of data you may want to pull from those states, to bring here into New Jersey in terms of some of the things that are going to sell and help us.
Well, that's a great point. In fact, stay tuned, because next week we have someone from outside of New Jersey, and I won't ruin the surprise. Definitely check out my LinkedIn profile when I put up the ad for next week. But for those of you who joined us maybe a little later, I want to thank CohnReznick, the firm of CohnReznick, who provided today's presentation. Really appreciate it. So George, if you want to have some closing thoughts, and I think I saw one last question. People were asking, are you just national or are you global?
We have a global footprint as well. CohnReznick offices. We also have affiliates, a large affiliate association that we belong with and work on our same methodologies, and we team with across the globe. So yes, we are international.
Yeah, and in the cannabis space itself, Ed, we're doing work in Great Britain, Germany, so mainland Europe, right now, as it's becoming more and more accepted, there, and we'll continue to do that, to George's point, throughout the globe. But the strongest footprint, I would say, here in North America.
Excellent. Great. Well, again, CohnReznick, I can't thank you enough for taking time and sharing that information. I'm sure people, if you can put in the chat feature your website, I'm sure they can find you on our New Jersey CannaBiz website. But if you want to throw some contact information in the chat, that would be great. I want to thank CohnReznick, today's presenters. I'd like to thank our sponsors, the law firm of Inglesino, Webster, Wyciskala, and Taylor, and Puffin Cannabis Entrepreneurs and Investors. I want to thank you all for taking time. Summer is here. I know some of you will actually be heading down to the shore shortly. Drive safely, drive sober, and absolutely, if there are any parting thoughts from CohnReznick, I'll leave it to you as our guests are wrapping.
We're just proud to be here. Happy Juneteenth, everyone, and we look forward to next week's presentation as well.
Great. Again, thank you all so much. See you next Friday at noon for the New Jersey CannaBiz Association Lunch and Learn. Thanks again, CohnReznick. Really appreciate your time.
Thank you. Our pleasure.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you.